before we start proceedings, can I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters? There's no fire alarm practice expected today, so if it does sound, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit and assemble at the assembly point in the Civic Square. Can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and that it's switched off when you're not using it? Can I ask your mobile devices are switched to silent? The meeting is broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. So by entering the Warspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of these recordings for the webcast. So I'll move on to item 1 of the agenda, which is apologies. Hannah, do we have any for today?
You, Chair, no apologies. We are trying to contact Councillor Nicholson to ask where he is, and also you've noticed independent member Annette Benny is attending online today.
Thank you, Hannah. So next item, declarations of interest. Do any members have any they wish to make? No? Excellent. Move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of February. You should have had a chance to have a look over those. Are members happy to agree these as an accurate record? Excellent, thank you. Chair's urgent business. I don't have any, so I'm going to move straight to David Northey, who has a brief update on the Capitalisation Directive.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So, first of all, I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues at MHCLG, because the last conversation I had with them, they said within 2 weeks we'll send you a letter. And within that 2-week window, the leader of the council did receive a letter from the minister. So thank you to the team for doing that. I think it's kind of public knowledge now, because a letter has been published to the press. But we are where we are, which is I am now actively discussing with my colleagues at MHCLG about the timing of the issuing of the capitalisation direction. So there's just a couple of questions that have been asked, but those have already been answered previously, but I'm just going to sum them up again and send them back. This being a new minister, previous replies to the previous incumbent. And then in terms of the SIP for review that they refer to, unfortunately that's still embargoed, but within the next couple of weeks I'm told that will become a public document from government, and at that time we can publish our response to that. So I think I've said before, in terms of recommendations, I'm not breaking the rules by saying there were 7 recommendations, and I've assured MHCLG that all 7 have been completed, and that's fine. So one last thing from me, if I might, Chair, is just to say, given where we are now, I would respectfully ask that this update comes off future agendas as being it'll now go through the Cabinet and Council route and be a closed item. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy for that to happen on the agendas going forward. So thank you for that, David. We're now going to move on to agenda item 6, which is the internal audit strategy and charter for 25 to 6. Louise, I believe this is you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Internal audit is a statutory service. The Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015 require an effective internal audit to evaluate the effectiveness of its risk management, control and governance processes, taking into account public sector internal auditing standards or guidance. One of the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards is that the purpose, authority and responsibility of the internal audit activity must be formally defined in an internal audit charter. The internal audit charter for this financial year is set out in detail on pages 17 of the report pack, with a supporting audit strategy on page 28. The internal audit charter must define the terms board and senior management for the purposes of internal audit activity and cover the arrangements for appropriate resourcing, define the role of internal audit in any fraud-related work, and to include arrangements for avoiding conflict of interest if internal audit undertakes non-audit activities. The audit strategy is a high-level statement of how the internal audit service will be delivered and developed in accordance with the Charter and how it links to the organisational objectives and priorities. It communicates the contribution that internal audit makes to the organisation and includes the internal audit's objectives and outcomes, how the head of Devon Assurance Partnership will form and evidence his opinion on the governance, risk and control framework to support the annual governance statement, how internal audit's work will identify and address significant local and national issues and risks, and how the service will be provided the resources and skills required to deliver the strategy. Members must also be aware that new global internal audit standards are due to come into force on the 1st of April 2025, which Devon Assurance Partnership are to conform, and committee will be updated on this as we progress through the year. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And just briefly welcome Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, apologies for being a few minutes late.
So does anyone have any questions for Louise on the internal audit strategy? Councillor Ray.
It's a query, really. How easy is it for us? Oh, it doesn't appear to be easy for us as committee members to understand whether there are any changes, significant changes between this one and what's gone before. Is there any way of enabling us to actually, I'm not suggesting we track changes, but for any significant changes to be flagged, please?
Certainly. So with this set of strategy and chart, there have been no significant changes since the last report. It's a requirement that obviously comes to Audit Committee and is agreed at Audit Committee as part of our mandate to operate our internal audit activities. We did actually bring this one forward because it has been coming to Audit and Governance Committee at the July meeting. So in effect, this has come back again in year. But that's because we wanted to bring it in line with the requirements going into the new global internal audit standards, which are coming into force from the 1st of April. So while this one hasn't got much change, there isn't really anything in there that I can actually pinpoint you to. There's no detailed change at all. Coming forward into next year, there will be a significant change in the sort of layout and some of the terminology. But the head of Devon Assurance Partnership will be working with committee members to bring them up to speed with our sort of conferences that we have, so that you'll actually understand how those standards are coming into force. But they come into force on the 1st of April. But this particular set hasn't changed really significantly, so there's nothing in there that members need to be aware of. And I will take that back in future if there are any changes, that's brought back as a track changes, so that's easily identifiable for you. Thank you.
That's helpful, thank you.
Any further questions for Louise? David?
Not a question. I was just going to reaffirm what we've just heard, which I think, picking up the theme from last meeting where we had a strategy that had changed, and I think that's a very good request that we do a sort of an executive summary or something at the start of a strategy that says the last time you saw it was at this meeting, these are the key points. We'll pick that up for all of the strategies, not just internal audit, treasury management and capital. So thank you.
Excellent. Any further questions or comments on the internal strategy and charter? Mrs. Benny?
It was just a quick one. So just to be clear in my mind, we've got this as a strategy and charter for 25-26. But what you're saying, Louise, is that we've got changes coming in later this year that will be updated on. And will that in effect overlay for 25-26, or will those new changes happen for 26-27?
Absolutely. So the public sector internal audit standards are in position up until the 31st of March, and then the new standards come into being from the 1st of April. But the requirements, and they're very similar, there's not much change. We do everything really, it's just adapting to the new ways of wording and things like that. We are required for Audit Committee to be presented with the charter and strategy once a year. So again, you will get the update formally presented to you later this year, so it will, or later next year, so it'll be this time next year you'll get the updated version. But the actual wording and the work we're already conforming to, so we're aware of what those standards are, and that's blending into our work as we start off from the 1st of April. And if we decide that it actually does need further clarity, then those will be brought to Audit Committee for update as required.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on this one? Okay, thank you, Louise. We'll move on to item 7, which, again, it's over to you again, Louise. Thank you. So this is the internal audit plan for 2025 to 26.
Thank you, Chair. On page 39 of your report pack is the actual internal audit plan for 2025-26. Internal audit standards require the preparation of a risk-based plan of internal audit activity that is designed to support an annual opinion on the effectiveness of the systems of governance, risk management and internal control, and is informed by the audit strategy, consultation with stakeholders and dynamic assessment of risks. The 25-26 internal audit plan has been developed as a high-level thematic plan underpinned by core assurance work. This will ensure that the focus of audit coverage is targeted according to the needs and priorities of the Council at that point in time, thereby enabling us to add most value. The table on page 43 details our proposed high-level and thematic overview of the audit coverage, and this should be considered alongside the charts on page 42, showing indicative allocation of resource to meet this summary plan. The thematic plan has been developed around the risks identified through risk management, audit needs assessment, perceptions of current risks, and in discussion with client management and the Section 151 officer. Audit work in the most high-risk areas is underpinned by core assurance work on the financial systems, numerous grant certifications, and work to evaluate management of the Council's ICT and cyber risks. Audit coverage for the year, based on the priority areas for review referred to in the thematic table on page 43, show a good spread of coverage across service areas, enabling us to provide assurance on a wider control framework from which we will build our annual assurance opinion. Detailed terms of reference will be drawn up and agreed with management prior to the start of each individual assignment. In this way, we can ensure that the key risks to the operation or functions are considered during our review. In addition, all limited assurance audits with high priority management actions will be tracked through to implementation. Audit and Governance Committee will be updated on delivery progress against the plan throughout the year as part of our established programme of work. The actual audit plan is an agile audit plan, so whilst at the moment this is the plan as it's set and agreed with the corporate management team and presented to yourself for agreement today, we will obviously adapt to the needs of the local authority depending on where the risks come from. So this fast-paced environment nowadays, so what is important now may be trumped by other things as it comes into sort of the risk pressures and budgets that the council are experiencing. So those updates, any changes will be brought to committee so that they can actually agree that and scrutinise those changes and the progress as we develop throughout the year. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies, you know, I'm effectively new to this committee, haven't had a long gap, so excuse me if I'm a bit sort of talking more in sort of lay language. The risk, could you explain a little bit more to a layperson how the risks are established? Because I'm looking at the thematic diagram you referred us to on page 43, and I want to understand a bit more about how those particular topics are being created. So I don't know if you can explain, you know, the components of your assessment of risk, and then, Chair, if I may ask a follow-up question, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So the actual, there's a big process that goes to actually bringing this plan to committee today. So we start off back in sort of December time, and at that time we will have conducted a range of audits in the beginning of the year and previous years. So I have what I would explain as my cumulative auditor's knowledge and experience of what's gone before. So what audit work we've done, where the risks lie in those audit work, what management actions are outstanding. We will also look at the corporate risk register, so the risk registers that come before yourself and the corporate management team and senior leaders of the council are required to monitor and take action against. So that, along with performance information, I will look at complaints information. I will also have discussions with each strategic directorate management team. So I've been to those management team or had conversations with those officers to understand, like, horizon scanning, what's happening within their areas, what's coming down the line. I will use information with our colleagues and other local authorities that are part of our Devon Assurance Partnership. So that would be in Devon County Council, Torbay, also Devon Somerset Fire and Rescue Services, the National Parks. All of those areas go through the same sort of process I have access to that information. And on that basis, I will present to the management team thoughts where I think the risks lie and where we think that we need to actually have some audit input so that we can actually give you and the council members and the senior management team assurance on what's happening with regards to those risks. Once I've taken all of the areas for audit planning, I will have further conversations with Section 151 and his team just to make sure that what we have in the plan is does recognise the risks and it appears to be a robust plan that gives coverage across the piece, as it actually looks at the objectives of the authority and the risks to those objectives, and we've got sort of a balanced plan there. So this here is sort of the outcome of a long piece of work that has gone before, and I do have that information to back that up as well, which is is open to you if anybody needs to have further information on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Louise, for that. So again, so the assurances at the bottom are what are driving the risks. So could I ask, in relation to safety of sports grounds, it's very, very specific, why that is a risk to this local authority? Because presumably it's more around an assurance from a governance point of view as opposed to a financial risk. So perhaps as I use that, Chair, as an example, if Louise could perhaps give a bit more information on that particular topic, please.
Through you, Chair. Yes, so this was in conversation with the Service Director for Strategic Planning and Infrastructure. So with regards to our work isn't necessarily just based on risk. We need to give assurance around the internal control framework as well. So that can be, what are the internal controls to mitigate the risks from regulatory, health and safety, or anything that the council have a duty or requirement to adhere to, we can be asked to look at. With regards to the safety at sports ground, they have an audit due by the safety at sports ground legislator later in the year, and as part of that process they would like assurance from us that the actual council have put in place a suitable internal control framework that will mitigate the risks associated with meeting those rules and regulations that are set out by the Safety at Sports Ground Council, so that we can give them the assurance or identify gaps where they need to and make improvements prior to going forward to have that scrutiny, external scrutiny.
Chair, thank you very much. Can I ask one final question? Or sorry,
Mrs. Benny's also been waiting patiently, so bring you in, Mrs. Benny.
Thank you. It was just a quick one, Louise, around, so we've got this comprehensive schedule on page 43. Are there any rising tide issues that haven't made the list? And if so, what happens to these? How are they monitored to ensure that actually, if they do need to come up and land on the list and something else needs to be deprioritised, what's the process around that, please?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So with regards to that it does happen. So for example, something that will come up which might be quite a hot topic, we did a piece of work for adults, health and communities, and that was in relation to the strike that was ongoing at that moment in time, and because of the risks associated with that, it was felt like the work that, or the allocation of resource would be better spent dealing with that risk that was facing the council at that moment in time, rather than doing something else that we had which felt was a lower risk for the authority and could be deferred to a later point. At that point, the conversation is had with the Section 151 as well as the Strategic Director of Adults, Health and Communities, and then that conversation is then had with myself, and then if that's felt that it would be something that would be appropriate to move the plan around, then that's what we would do to adapt that. And that would then come back through yourself, through our progress report that comes through in September, and our half-yearly report. We do update you on changes to the audit programme, and where audits will possibly be deferred into a later quarter or into next year, for example. If I feel like things are being sort of delayed or deferred unnecessarily, I've been asked to delay things, then obviously I will bring that back to Audit Committee. For example, the one that we're looking at, tree management policy and processes, has slipped into this year. That was in last year, and the reason because that slipped is because the directorate is undergoing sort of a change around restructure at the moment. So we're going to have a look at that in this year. So we deferred it into this from last. So if I feel that it's appropriate that it needs to be done, and I do get pushback, then I will challenge that, and it will actually stay in the plan. If I do require to escalate it, I will escalate it via the section 151. And then obviously if I do not have any traction as per the strategy and charter, that will come back to audit committee as the sort of board for audit in Plymouth City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Councillor Nicholson back in now.
Thank you very much, Chair. The collection fund for council tax, when was that last audited as a process, please? And for time immemorial, our collection rate has stayed at some 97.5%. So I'd like to know what, you know, has it been assured of the processes in recent years? And is this plan a plan that could effectively look into how we could try and get the collection rate up?
Through you, Chair. Yes, so council tax is on our audit programme every year. So you will see it down there in the key financial systems. It's one of the we have on the core assurance, and we are, as part of the test that we do around council tax, we do look at collection rates, and our audit reports do reflect on that as well. So that is on our radar every year, and we will report back to committee on that as part of our updates to audit committee. If there are any requirements to improve collection rates, or we can identify any areas for improvement, that will be made in that audit report as we do each year.
I've just seen Councillor Lowry indicating. Did you want to comment?
I was going to make the general point anyhow that this plan is dynamic, which Louise has explained, and if members feel at any stage they would like some reassurance in any area they have concerns of, obviously this report is presented consistently throughout the year anyhow. So if you've got some concerns, I think it's appropriate to ask Louise or a member of the team, and they can give you an update to explain what happened, when and where. And if there is a potential gap or a concern, then it's in the gift of the committee to make a recommendation for the audit plan to be amended to reflect your wishes.
Thank you. Does anyone have any further questions on this one? Okay, we'll move on to, before we move on to item 8, there's actually 2 recommendations. First of all, that we agree the internal audit charter and strategy, and also approve the 2025 and 26 internal audit plan. Are members happy to agree both of those? Excellent. So number 8 is the Treasury Management Practices, Principles and Schedules. And I'm going to hand over to Wendy Eldridge for this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Right. Document I'm presenting starts from page 51, and it's the SIPA code. The SIPA Code of Practice on Treasury Management requires the Council to publish its practices, principles and schedules each year. This document is in place to ensure the Council's Treasury Management policy is being adhered to, and that working practices and controls are in place to adopt the approved Treasury Management strategy. There are no alternative options other than to publish this and get this report approved. For effective Treasury Management, there are the Treasury Management policy statements sets out the policies and objectives and approach to risk management. There are it identifies suitable Treasury practices, and it also looks at and how the authority will seek to achieve these policies and objectives, and how it manages to control those activities. It also expands covering investment management practices that are not for Treasury management purposes. As an index on page 56 refers to an index on various TM practices together with the Treasury Management Principle number and page. There are 13 practices overall, and these range from interest rate risk, delegations of authority, who are external advisors, etc. To ensure that there's there is robust due diligence procedures, covers all investments. It's covered by, we do this by reviewing our credit and counterparty risk, and we use our external treasury management advisors to give additional assurance. Cash flow and cash balances receive effective and considerable forecasting and monitoring through the year. As you can imagine, there are the actual cash that goes through the council's funds is quite considerable, and we look to hold a working balance or a daily working balance of 20 million to protect the council against cash flow risk and avoid the need to borrow at short notice where interest rates can be excessively high. Each day, surplus monies are transferred to the money market funds, which through the year have attracted interest rates of circa 5%. So the money isn't is earning additional income that supports its treasury management function. The council has an authorised overdraft limit with its bankers, Barclays, at 100,000. So we maximise having as much balances or as high a balance we can put into our money market funds, as well as after we've dealt with our day-to-day costs, meeting creditors and payroll, etc. Interest rate risk underpins the council's decision making on borrowing, with projections of Bank of England rate reductions coming through 2025 and sources of other local authority lending being limited in the final quarters of the year. This is an area that we particularly target and to adhere to our treasury management strategy, where we're aiming to achieve a borrowing rate of 4.5% in 25-26. Particular attention is given to reviewing different scenarios of borrowing. So at present, it's cheaper to borrow through the Public Works Loan Board than it is to use other local authorities. So we approach that, but in the early part of the financial year, it normally swings the other way. So we do have quite a suite of borrowing, and we are experiencing in 24-25, the first time ever is LOBOs being called in, which are where we've had borrowing at rates of in excess of sort of 4%, and now being called in by those lenders. They're giving us the option to continue lending at 6%, which we're refusing. We're paying that off, and then we're looking to secure better rates as the rates sort of start to come down. We'll start to fix in some of these liabilities, which are sort of going on into quite a few years, the next sort of 50 years. The authority aims to be a responsible investor and will consider environmental and social and governance issues. And I'd like to draw your attention to page 63 that has a statement on that. So at times at high interest, the council has taken measures to hold borrowing at fixed rates. So this is where we will use PWLB, but we've also got a interest rate swap arrangement with Santander, which covers 75 million short-term borrowing, which offers further rate risk protection under that arrangement. That said, borrowing to support cash flow through 24-25 has increased, and the ongoing element of the capital programme being funded by internal borrowing, which is known as corporate service borrowing, will require additional sort of borrowing and additional sort of challenges to ensure that the borrowing rates remain affordable and within our treasury management funding envelope. The council submits regular borrowing projections to MHCLG to secure a certainty rate, which is 20% lower, 20 basis points lower than the standard PWLB. And then finally, just to draw your attention, page 78 sets out training and qualifications of officers responsible for treasury management. In Appendix 1 on page 84 sets out the organisation which supports the treasury management function. yeah, as I say, I just want to add that I've got 3 key members of the Treasury Management team as service accountants, and within them they've got 80 years plus experience. So we've got quite a strong knowledge base. Yeah.
It's all have grey hair like me, do
Yeah. They're younger than me. Page 79 to 80 sets out the use of external providers, and that's the main sort of presentation of this report. So through you, Chair, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Wendy. Does anybody have any questions on this? Councillor Rainsford.
Can I seek some clarification about the use of advisors here? Clearly, you have a number of different external advisors covering a range of different areas on this. And I assume the use of advisors fluctuates quite a lot, and they are also quite expensive. Where does the risk sit legally if you get, and I'm sure there are lawyers in the room who know the answer to this, but I don't. Where does the risk sit if we get some really duff advice, which we follow in good faith, and everything goes sort of wrong, and we end up with a huge bill at the end of it?
Actually, that is probably.
I think Liz is best placed to answer.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I think, sorry, just to give you some assurance, we do have Treasury Management Advisors, and primarily we do that through a company called Arlington Close, who I think roughly provide in excess of 80% of advice to local authorities. And we've been working with them for a number of years, and their fees, dare I say, are appropriate in a public meeting. And I'm comfortable with them. But in respect to the legal aspects, I think Liz is probably best placed to answer your question, Councillor.
Generally, professional legal advice comes with an indemnity. So we would normally be indemnified should we need to make a claim. If we have a claim against us, we then make a claim against the advisors.
Thank you. Answers the question.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Thank you for that, Wendy. So we have a recommendation to approve the Treasury Management Practices, Principles and Schedules for 25 to 26 as set out in the report. Are members happy to agree that? Thank you. Move on to agenda item 9. This is the review of the efficiency and effectiveness of constitutional update. And Ross Jago is going to give a verbal update on this. Over to you, Ross.
Thanks, Chair. This follows the committee's approval of changes to Part B of the Constitution and the rules of debate, which you agreed in July last year, which were subsequently approved by Council in September. The changes were mostly around the rules of debate, in particular defining more clearly what a closure motion was, what happened around that, limiting the motions on notice section of the agenda to 2 hours, and giving a new deadline for motions on notice, which were a little bit earlier for councillors. So certainly from an officer point of view, the additional time to be able to review and take some time to review motions on notice before they're published has been very helpful. I think in terms of timing, which was the reason for the 2 hour limit to motions on notice, was to reduce the overall time of council meetings. It seems to have made an impact. We were looking at about 7.5 hours per meeting in 2021, 7 hours in 22 and 23, and that has now reduced. So before September 2024, average meeting duration was about 4.5 hours. After September, it's been about 2.5 hours. Members, invite any comments on how the changes have worked for you, because of course that it's your constitution and your rules of debate. So I'll open the floor to questions or comments, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ross on this? No? Oh, Councillor Nicholson.
That's fine, Ross, but I think obviously we need to look at the actual debate, and some of those discussions have been curtailed, haven't they, through the provisions in the Constitution. So it's not as wholly as it seems, because there have been some closure motions in relation to going to the vote, referring some motions to scrutiny. I think what ought to be taken into account, Chair, is that where scrutiny want to debate a motion that's referred to them, that the proposers be given adequate notice that it's going to be taken to Scrutiny Management Board. And it just doesn't appear in a calendar, but there's some narrative around it, because I know that certain motions that have recently gone, there wasn't really an indication by those who have moved or seconded that they were expected to be present at the Scrutiny Management Board to make a, you know, to address the Scrutiny Management Board on the motion. So I think that just needs to be tweaked, just to make sure that people understand, you know, if something goes in the diary, what's it going in the diary for? And what the expectation is. So I think that's quite easy to tweak, and I think it's quite good that perhaps some of these motions have a second opportunity to be discussed at a scrutiny management review. So that would be my only comment. I generally wasn't supportive of the proposal, but I was on holiday in America at the time, so I couldn't challenge it. But I think it's worth reviewing in the future, just to make sure that democracy prevails and that anybody with a big majority can't thwart the democratic process. Thank you.
Hey, Ross, did you want to come back on that at all?
I think what Councillor Nicholson said around scrutiny is perfectly valid. We'll certainly take some actions to improve that going forward. Concerning the rest of the Constitution, we've got some really big things happening, of course, over the next 12 to 18 months. I think the impact of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill alone will probably mean some significant rewrites to the Constitution. So, you know, that will occur through this forum, Chair. So I'm sure there will be further amendments as required.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments on the constitutional update? No? Excellent. We'll move on to item number 10, civic protocol, and I'd like to welcome Glenda and also Maddie, who are going to present this report. Over to you, Glenda.
Through you, Chair, thank you for having us again. At the last ANG Audit and Governance, we've been asked to come back with version control, the old part or the old version of the civic handbook and the updated handbook. Hopefully everybody had a review. And just to note again from what I said from previous meeting, Chair, it is we did this because the civic handbook hasn't been updated for some time. It needed to be updated because, you know, to streamline the process of the officer supporting the Lord Mayor exactly knowing what he or she or they are supposed to do when they're in the seat. And in that sense, if we can have any comments or questions, or we'll be very
Over the floor, Councillor Nicholson.
Well, I've got a number of points, Chair. Do you want me to rattle through them or take them one at a time, or how would you like to deal with matters?
I'll ask Glenda, how would you prefer this? All at once, or how many points do you have, Councillor Nicholson?
Well, about 6, but I wouldn't necessarily. I'll see how they go initially, because some of them are not about January, it's about actually. They won't agree to that one. Sort of ascertaining more information. But could I just say at the outset, if I may, Chair, that it's been very useful to have a deferral from the last meeting to properly be able to read through it, and certainly I would appreciate you know, extending to the officers the good work in reviewing this, and clearly, you know, there were a number of members involved in a working group, so these things are well worth reviewing on a time-to-time basis. There are just a few matters, if I could just plough into them. So 5.10, travel and the civic car. So looking at the finance, we spent about £6,000 on the car. We also have coming before us at Council next week the net zero climate change policies of the Council. And I just wondered how, it's a bit of an inconsistent approach. So we're expecting the Lord Mayor to travel in his or her car or on public transport, to pick up a car that effectively is used a lot less than it ever has been. That's parked in the city centre, stored at Ballard House, but picked up from here at the council house. I just wonder, if I take myself as an example, I'm a representing Plympton, reside in the east of the city. I might have an engagement in Plympton. I'm expected to come into the city centre either by my own vehicle or on public transport, to be then taken out by an electric car or civic car to an engagement, and then effectively brought back to pick up my car. And if I was on public transport, presumably I'd be left in Plympton. I just wonder if the arrangements are appropriate in the modern age, where we've got a climate efficient motor vehicle to transport the Lord Mayor, but the protocols that are being suggested now really don't reflect what would be most efficient, both in time and to the climate, in relation to the operation of 510 and its paragraph 4. So I raise that, Chair, as one point, because there's practical issues here that I don't actually think it accords with what we should be trying to achieve in terms of efficiency, but also climate change. So that was one. The second one was 511, attends at the garden party. We say the former Lord Mayor attends. Why doesn't the Lord Mayor, when they're in office, attend the garden party, the Queen's garden party? Also, just
Because we don't have a Queen anymore as well.
or King's garden party, sorry, habit. The other one is around the chains of office. Now, it was always, and obviously for those who are unaware, I was the Lord Mayor coming up 20 years ago, so I have some previous experience of this. It was never the case that the chains were ever left with the incumbent in their own home. And I understand issues around, perhaps there are events now where the Lord Mayor can't be supported by a mace bearer. Why, in fact, the Lord Mayor then doesn't wear the collar out? Because the danger is, if you lose the chains in any respect, it's going to be difficult to replicate them given their historical nature. So again, I have some concerns around the way in which the chain of office, which has a lot of history and predates effectively the Lord Mayor's role, that the previous mayors that existed in Plymouth, certainly got concerns about that. Just in relation to commemorative badges, 6.5, I'm pleased that there's more clarity on that. Just from a budget point of view, I'd hope that generally when I think Maddie puts the budget together, that the cabinet member recognises in-year pressures that might exist through the role of the Lord Mayor and the impact that the council has on the Lord Mayor's role. So when it comes to giving honours for freedom of the city, there are impacts on the Lord Mayor's budget. So therefore, for a very tight budget, and this budget has shrunk over the years and is pretty minimal now in terms of flexibility, politicians who impact the budget should have some ability to adjust the budget to reflect their decisions. So what I perceive as an outsider or observer is that councils make decisions and then the Lord Mayor's budget has to pick the consequences up, even though it may not have provided for that in the council budget. So that's just one point. And finally, around, well, a couple of points. Political neutrality. The Deputy Lord Mayor has never been historically politically neutral per se, because that person has been an active member of the council. And what we have seen is increasingly, whether this is done consciously or sort of overtly, has tried to then make the Deputy Lord Mayor role the same as the Lord Mayor. So the Lord Mayor should be politically neutral, obviously to gain credence dealing with councils in particular. But certainly the Deputy Lord Mayor was always the case, was an active councillor and only really became neutral when that person was standing in for the role of the Lord Mayor. So I'm just conscious that we need to make sure that when we're talking about, well, the Deputy Lord Mayor shouldn't speak in the chamber unless it's on a matter they have specific knowledge. It's all a little bit vague. I don't think it actually needs to be there, with the greatest respect. the Lord Mayor's chairing the meeting. If the Deputy Lord Mayor's chairing the meeting, then they shouldn't be partaking of a political nature in any case. And I suppose the final thing is the Astor diamonds. That Lady Astor gave those diamonds, which for those who have got no knowledge of them, it is basically can be a necklace or it can be used in other ways, including earrings. That was given to the city by Lady Astor for the use of the Lady Mayoress or the Lord Mayor if that person happened to be female. And it's a shame that now we're saying in the guidance that there isn't enough resource to be able to use them because they've fallen effectively into disrepair. Well, that's news to me until I sort of read this. And it's just sad that why that would be the case. Where is it a cop-out because we can't afford to have them repaired? Are they generally old and of an age that they can't be used? You know, there are many such jewellery held by other organisations, not least the royal family, where these things are kept going. And for the sake of 3 or 4 times a year, it's sad that we can't keep the tradition for which they were given to the city of Plymouth by Lady Astor when she was given the freedom of the city, that can't prevail in 2025. So those are my overarching comments, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think Councillor Stevens.
I'm happy for Councillor Nicholson to be replied to, except, and don't take that in a negative way, just on the diamonds issue. If it is merely a case of cost that's stopping them from being usable and used, I think given the historical nature that Patrick has quite rightly referred to, I would be amazed if there weren't local jewellers who wanted to assist the city and get their reward, not in terms of monetary value, but the publicity that it would afford them having contributed to bringing something back into civic life. If it was Bill Stevens Jewellers Limited, I would jump at the no, it's a serious point. I would jump at the chance of having my name associated, or my company's name associated with a historic and civic improvement and getting something back to life. But I have got other issues which I'll come back to if I may after Patrick's been helped.
I'll hand back to Maddie and Glenda to come back to Patrick.
I'll go back to the question that are coming from the two, the same question from the two councillors and gentlemen across the table. The Astor Diamonds, it's not just a matter of money or finance. It is very old and it's very fragile. So if we repair it, if anybody has seen it, when hopefully, if we can have, it's, when they said to me Astor Diamonds, when I came to Plymouth, I thought it was this big diamond that I can hold and say, this is a whole diamond. No, it's groups of little diamonds, and they're all encased in this very thinly thing of encasing, like when you have an engagement ring, right? And they're very old and they're very fragile. And so much so that apparently when it was Councillor, very much loved Councillor Pengelly, used it, they lost one. They lost one and they found it again, but it took how many hours for it to find it when they were at the aquarium. So my thing is, it's, of course there's the finance part of it, but it is very fragile because it is very old. It is very old because when we looked at when it was bought by the Astors, from New York, it is very much like nearly 100 years old. So for us to do it, yes, we can. But then if we're going to do it, it's going to be fiddly, it's going to be costly. And then if we're going to do it, we are not very sure how good it's going to be, that it's our people from the box who are the jewelry authorized people. It says Glenda would rather that it's going to be in the museum to be part of our collection, because it will be a matter of Maddie looking for 1 or 2 diamonds on the floor. Because they are very fragile. They are very small. They're not this big thing that I can hold in one hand. I hoped it was, but it wasn't.
Councillor Cudahy.
Glenda, can I just come back on that subject? I assume that means then that you haven't consulted with a jeweller or a restorer?
Yeah.
Or have you?
We have consulted with the box as well as our insurance people, and as well as our local jewelers here that usually does our jewelry, the ones who repair the badges and the collarettes and the things that the Lord Mayoralty uses. We have consulted them. Yeah, they can do it, but it's going to be fiddly, costly, and they're not going to be assuring us that it's not going to go wrong again because of the age of the diamonds. And it's not the diamonds that are in question, it's the ones that are the little fronds that are supporting each and little diamonds that are in the case.
Does anyone have any further comments or points to make about the Astor diamonds?
All I would
Councillor
suggest is
Nicholson.
that a lot of it's subjective. You know, obviously we're not here to micromanage the organisation, but has a survey, a written report being given by sort of a jewellery expert in terms of, because, and I'm not saying this should happen very often, but say we had a lovely civic dinner. Actually, it would be appropriate for that dinner for potentially those diamonds to be used once a year or once every few, if there was a really special event. And I think writing it off on the basis of the guidance says we're going to make them the museum piece isn't really the spirit in which they were given originally. And there's a lot of potentially subjectivity here. And I think it would just be very useful because there's lots of probably other jewellery of this nature that exists in Britain that it's very delicate, and it is very delicate, but that doesn't mean to say it shouldn't be used in a very controlled and careful manner, as it always was previously, before obviously we effectively haven't used it in recent years. So that would be my only point.
It's I think 2018 or 2019 when I took over the Lord Mayor's office from Sean, there was a report that came from our insurance, the Box and Jewelers. I'll get that out because they did say that it's so fragile that they'd rather that we don't use it at all because of that it's very, very fragile now. But I'll have a look, and if through your chair, if there's going to be a request for us to have another investigation via our jewelers, the insurance, and the box, and we'll do that again. Yeah, because the last one we did was 2018, 2019. Okay.
Okay, that would be really helpful. Thank you, Glenda. If there's no, Councillor Stevens. I just wondered if I was going to give the officers a chance to come back on Patrick's other points before I bring you in.
I can remember from the very last to can we work on the diamonds to political neutrality. The question or the comment, Councillor Nicholson, is Deputy Lord Mayor's neutrality. Is that the one that we need to add the Deputy Lord Mayor into the document? Is that what you?
No, what you're saying, let me just bring it up. So what it's saying in the, let's bring up the actual page. Effectively, it's saying that the Deputy Lord Mayor shouldn't speak at a council meeting because they're the Deputy Lord Mayor, unless they have specific.
Section 11, Patrick.
Is it lovely? I started at the top.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
146.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay, we'll have that reviewed. I'll work with.
So it. Where are we?
Committee. I'll work with the committee and have that.
Political
go back.
neutrality is expected from the Deputy Lord Mayor who may vote in council meetings. Well, we don't need to say that. It's a fact. But should avoid speaking on contentious issues unless there are specific knowledge. Well, they're politicians. They're only Deputy Lord Mayor for the purposes of the council meeting or civic functions. When they're in the council meeting, they are an active member of the council. So we really shouldn't be saying that because it creates. They're only when they're sitting in the chair as the Lord Mayor, then they should be neutral. But if you take Councillor Penberthy in recent times, he was the Deputy Lord Mayor, and then you brought this thing in, and I'm going to challenge you here, but I don't agree with it, that they couldn't be in the cabinet. That sort of, and what we're doing is we're moving the boundaries are being moved. And I don't know why specifically there has ever been an issue. That there never has been an issue. And all I would say is I don't think you should be saying that the Deputy Lord Mayor shouldn't be able to speak at a council meeting if it's contentious. Because again, it's all subjective. Who's going to say whether it's contentious or not? Are we going to have, you know,
Patch, I'm just going to bring in Councillor Rainsford.
Can I sort of play slightly devil's advocate? I think from a public perspective, viewing the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor fully berobed and sitting up there in a sort of neutral position, it would be difficult for members of the public to understand why this neutral looking individual is suddenly becoming party political, dressed in full robes, when they can't have pictures taken for political purposes in those full robes. So I would venture to suggest that perhaps if the Deputy Lord Mayor wanted to speak in a debate, that they remove themselves to the floor, or at least they weren't in. There's a contradiction if you can't have pictures taken in your robes for political purposes, and yet you are speaking in the council chamber from a political perspective. I think from a public's point of view looking in, it starts to get a little bit confused.
I'm speaking from sort of history, and it's a lot different from the House of Commons, where deputy speakers are, like the Speaker, totally apolitical. That has never been the case in local government. And so, as far as Plymouth, generally, the Lord Mayor is non-political, not the deputy. And the thing is, where it becomes difficult is particularly where you've got a very tight council. So if you abstract two people from the council, and it's almost a hung council, or it just gets very difficult. You know,
don't misunderstand me. I shouldn't be political. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'm saying that there is a perception problem from the public watching of the person in the robes having a political view. I don't have an easy answer as to how you'd resolve it.
Councillor Stevens, bring you in now.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I can see both points of view here. I think there's merit in both arguments, and there is no sort of easy answer. I do. I think if we're accepting that the Deputy Lord Mayor can vote as he or she chooses, then you don't need to include it, because I can vote how I choose in the chamber, and all of us can here. So I don't know if there's no restriction on someone's voting because they're Deputy Lord Mayor, then don't mention it. I think that should be removed. I personally think there is something a little bit inelegant, shall we say, about the Deputy Lord Mayor in the robes, sat up there next to the Lord Mayor, part of the civic team, and then standing up and saying, "Oh, I hate the Conservatives because blah, blah, or I hate Labour because..." There's something not quite right about that, I think. I think that should... Not speaking in the council meeting, and there'll always be exceptions if it's a civic issue or, I don't know, paying tribute to someone who's died, or there'll always be exceptions at the edge. But I think generally, being Deputy Lord Mayor is an honour, and one of the prices I think you pay for that honour is not being politically contentious in council meetings when you're wearing the robes and the deputy's chain. If you can't do that, if you want to be, if you're the sort of person like Patrick and I who insist on making those speeches, then don't be Deputy Lord Mayor. That's it's that simple. No one holds a gun to anyone's head forcing them to do the job. I think that taking out the bit about the voting and keeping where we are, as Alison said, in terms of not drawing the Deputy Lord Mayor into political debate, I think is the right way to go, personally.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Nicholson, did you want to come back on Councillor Stevens or Councillor Rainsford's comments?
I largely agree with Councillor Stevens, and the reality is the incumbents. I don't know of an incumbent who's used their office to be party political. So even though people have, Deputy Lord Mayors have spoken, I can't really remember anybody speaking in a manner that was totally out of order. So I think the incumbents have generally respected the fact that they're in a role and therefore they act differently perhaps to when they're in the body of the chamber. But just for clarity, I just think that one sentence would better being removed than it would be kept in, and allow, you know, the judgment of the person that holds that office to prevail. That's all from, because generally these rules have been used in the past to obviously have a discussion with incumbents. So that was that, Chair.
And I'll revert back to the officers to address your further point.
Okay, through you, Chair, it's might I say that the the fourth paragraph was taken from the old protocol. Just saying. So what I'm gonna do, what we can do is we've taken notes and we'll go back to the committee and get a better, maybe it's the nuance of the words, maybe it needs to be more nuanced and it's not very harsh kind of thing, because reading it again on this side with the specific, it's like who may, can't say unless, it's like I think we will go back to the committee and get it more nuanced, if that's okay. Commemorative badges. I welcome Councillor Nicholson's mentioning that it is the budget that we have is set every year, and that perhaps if there is a need of, because every year it's not going to be the same number of aldermen or narrow freemen. Sometimes we have 2, sometimes we have 6. So it is, we will take that on board and we will speak to the powers that be that holds the money strings and say, you know, it's not every year is the same, and we'll take that on board.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate reassurance, because when it comes to civic occasions, people wearing badges, having held offices, it's all part of the traditions of the City of Plymouth, and I don't think it right that the budget doesn't support the actions of councillors in conferring a freedom or an honorary alderman or somebody who's been the Lord Mayor not being able to receive a badge because there's insufficient budget. So I welcome that. Thank you.
And Royal Garden Party, it'll be a 2-part response. Maddie will do the first one.
Simple answer is we've got into the cycle of doing it that way, unfortunately. So if we were to change it, we're going to get someone who's going to miss out. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah. So the Royal Garden Party's in May, so it is done at the very end of the Lord Mayor's term for that year. But if we were to change it now, we're going to have someone that misses out. It's purely just that timing, and we've got into the cycle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. I think the part gone was probably moved a month or 2, which has had that impact, isn't it? So no, totally accept that. Thank you.
Okay, so that's accepted. I won't say anything more. I think for me, it's the May. It's this 2-week window that is always, you know, it's like the garden party is after the fact. So it's like, how do we invite the current one that was just given the honor 2 weeks ago, or the one that has served for 1 year? So that's the response to that one, Councillor Nicholson. And then the travel and civic car on net zero and efficiency. Maddie?
Completely take on board what you said there. I will reassure you that where we've got an event outside of the city or within the city but not central, the Lord Mayor or Deputy are picked up from their home address. This tends to be the coming into the city is when the event itself is actually in the city centre. We do obviously have the electric car. The Lord Mayor's car is electric, and I do get your point that we've got a Macebear who could potentially drive out and pick them up and bring them in. But that does bring other costs in terms of we still got to charge the electric car, we still got staff costs as well there, where they're driving out and picking them up. Does that make sense?
So it makes sense. Perhaps we could water down what's said in the book, because at the moment it looks very regimented, and I think in reality it's not as it's spelt out.
So it looks like they have to travel into the council house in order to pick up the civic car.
So I think either taking it out or making it less sort of prescriptive would be much better. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll do that.
Any further, Councillor Stevens? These are your different ones.
Excellent, thank you so much. 6.5, medals. The second sort of mini paragraph after medals, it is not normal for medals to be worn, totally get that, but there is a tradition that's endorsed by both the British Legion and the Ministry of Defence for those of us who've had relatives who have passed on but have medals to wear them on the right-hand side at military-minded civic events. So I would hope that, so long as I can have an assurance that were a Lord Mayor to be robing up on Remembrance Day and putting their relatives' medals on the right, no one's going to challenge it. If I can have that assurance, then I'm happy with what's in there.
Councillor, I think this is the run of the mill. It's like a general thing, but I think we can add that as well if that
Okay,
gives
well-
assurance to everybody, because it is like, you have to remember, Plymouth is a military town. It would most likely be that your key point, your new ones, needs to be there as a statement, so that it is going to be part of the protocol. Because it's far and few between, but if it happens, there's no questions asked then.
That's really helpful, thank you. The second one, there's a lot of talk about appointing chaplains and hosting church services. What flexibility or provision are there for office holders who aren't either Christians or religious at all?
I'll be very honest and transparent. I've never been asked that question ago. For the long, it's the first time we have been asked, and it hasn't been done or been put out in the committee's realm or vision. So we'll make sure that we ask that. We always have to remember that the protocols that we have is an amalgamation of what we have in the city, because we are Plymouthians and we are very special. I've realized that the last 6 years. And there's also the NACO protocol, which encompasses the civic protocol that the guidance that is done by all mayoralty in the country, and as well as the palace. So that question that you've asked, we will look through the annals and the books and see what we can do. And perhaps if there's none, then we will go back to the committee and says, I think perhaps we have to go to open up to the 21st century and say we have to have a protocol on this one as well.
I think that's really helpful. I mean, people can guess my individual situation. There are some people who would take it a bit more, not seriously. Anyway, people who would find it difficult to accept the office if there were religious connotations attached to it that were mandatory, shall we say. A Lord Mayor who said, well, thank you for making me Lord Mayor, but I don't want to chair council meetings, thank you. You'd laugh at that. But a Lord Mayor who would have difficulty going into certain religious consecrated buildings is a lot more likely. So I just think, rather than reinvent the wheel now, I think if we can have some discussions behind the scenes, that would be helpful, if that's okay, yeah.
Councillor Nicholson, then Mrs. Benny's also got her hand up as well.
Sorry, just to come back on Councillor Stevens' last point, if I may. That's the benefit, I suppose, of having the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor, in that there are times when, for particular reasons, the Lord Mayor may not want to do something where the Deputy Lord Mayor could stand in. So, we have had, in my time here, somebody who's a pacifist and didn't like any sort of connection with the armed forces. Given the fact that we're Plymouth, it's hard to divorce the role. So that's when the deputy particularly would stand in. Insofar as the Lord Mayor's civic service is concerned, well, if they were of no faith, that wouldn't take place, would it? I don't know what an alternative, Councillor Stevens, for somebody who wasn't of faith would want to perhaps do something else. I don't know, because I'm not in that position. But we could spend a lot of time, officers, looking at a sort of protocol, but I think looking at it as a package of the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor would in some ways help somebody who wasn't religious at all. I suppose, things like traditionally, we are a Christian society and we still celebrate Christmas, we have a carol service. Now, if somebody wasn't a Christian and wasn't prepared to attend, then again, hopefully the deputy would attend. Or indeed, there are provisions, and the officers can sort of correct me, but in the event that the Lord Mayor or Deputy Lord Mayor are not available, the immediate past Lord Mayor could be considered to attend an event to represent the city. So you know, I don't know, again, Councillor, that all helps, but, you know, there should be flexibilities to recognise somebody who's coming into an office if they've got particular religious or non-religious beliefs.
Councillor Stevens, want the officers to come back on that? Or
No, I'm more than happy
just a
to,
contribution.
like I say, if rather than us craft a protocol now in the remaining
Yeah.
however long we've got, let's have some discussions behind the scenes, which
Yeah.
is always the best way.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Benny.
Thank you. It was just one key point, being a mum to a daughter in the Navy, and that was around the medals on the right. There's apparently very specific rules around that. So if we're going to mention it, sorry, I've got a puppy in the way here. Can we also be really clear about what the rules are in terms of your ancestors and relations? Because she often sees it where people are doing it inappropriately. So as I say, that's just experience from what she said. So let's make sure we get it correct if people are going to wear them on the right.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you, Mrs. Benny.
I've got one more,
Okay.
I promise. It's in the under the political neutrality bit where we mentioned that a Lord Mayor standing for election as a councillor can't use photos involving the chain or the robes, etc., which I totally get. I'm assuming that wouldn't stretch to just mentioning the fact. So my colleague sat next to me, when he stands for election, will no doubt put out an election address saying I was leader of the council, deputy leader, chair of this committee, whatever, and I was Lord Mayor, which is a matter of public record and public fact. So so that wouldn't be a problem, I'm assuming, whereas a lovely 20-year-old photo of Patrick in his robes probably would. Not the age, of course. But if that's the case, then that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Are we all clear about that? Okay. If there's no further questions on the civic protocol, which should be in place in time for the new Lord Mayor taking office for the next civic year, are we happy to note the draft in its current form with the further discussions and clarifications that are going to take place and hopefully be in place in time for the full council AGM? Councillor Rainsford?
Sorry, Chair. Can we just clarify whether or not we have a meeting between now and then? Because I assume we have to agree it. Do we have to agree the changes that are made? Or can that go through without any further?
Through you, Chair. So it's for the committee to be consulted on any views that they have on the document, and if there was wider governance issues that you felt linked in, you would agree those. But on this specific thing, it would be for the subcommittee that was set up to deal with your comments.
Thank you.
Does that help? Yeah.
Sorry, they're going to deal and what, and feedback to us, Jamie? Yeah. So why don't we agree it's subject to what Jamie's probably noted down with the officers, and then perhaps in the next meeting we could, or the meeting after, just have one sheet of paper just summarising what based on this discussion what final changes might be made to the. So don't produce the whole document again. Let's and try and close it out by then.
Yeah. Yeah. So committee are happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we now move on to the tracking decisions. This is agenda item 11. So this is to note. If there's no queries or objections on that, and if committee are happy to note that, we'll move on to the work programme, item 12. Any discussion points to raise? Any comments, queries? No? Excellent. So that leaves me, we're almost finished now for the afternoon. Just one more really important item of business, and that's to give our thanks to David Northey, who's going to be leaving us soon. This is your last audit and governance meeting. I hope it was a suitably memorable and entertaining one for you. And yes, good luck with whatever your hard-earned retirement.
In audit terms, David's been very adequate.
Thank you, Councillor
I've given you
Stevens.
reasonable assurance of I might know something. Thank you very much, Chair. That's very kind of you.
And I think with that, we can draw the meeting to a close. Thank you all for attending and see you at the next meeting.